Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time today to join us as we virtually meet again. We all thought of this as a temporary situation, but it is what it is, and we're adjusting. My name is Boyana. I work at Syntelli Solutions, which is data science consulting firm, and I also manage marketing and events for the ABD Society. For those who are joining us for the first time, the Analytics and Big Data Society is a nonprofit organization based in Charlotte that believes in the use of data for social good. Sorry about that. The society has been carrying this message through the various events we've been hosting. So here, I'd like to thank the UNCC School of Data Science, our partner in organizing these events. As some of you may know, these events are usually hosted in person at the UNCC Charlotte Center City Building uptown. But as I said, we're adjusting to the new normal now. Also, this is our last lunch and learn session for the season. We will continue as per usual in September. But this doesn't mean that we don't already have our first signature event for the year lineup this August. So continue to follow us on social media and stay up to date with all our news. In the meantime, I'd like to invite you to Syntelli's Financial Fireside Chat with Banking Leaders, which is next Wednesday on June 24th. So for more information, visit syntelli.com and don't forget to register. Now I will hand it over to Chuck McShane, one of our ABD Society board members. Chuck.
Thanks, Boyana, and thanks everyone for joining us today. To move on to a little bit about our speaker, who's joining us all the way from Iceland today, Renata Barajas. A little bit about Renata. She's the co-founder and CEO at GreenBytes, which is a forecasting service provider for food retailers that uses machine learning algorithms to predict future food consumption. Renata has a background in mechanical engineering and sustainable energy engineering, and she has experience as a CAD technician and has worked in research and development for new bearing designs for wind turbines, which is relevant to some of the projects we have going on here in Charlotte, some of the manufacturers here as well. Renata has written a thesis on multi-criteria wind energy site assessment process that considers social, environmental, and efficiency factors from both the energy production and electricity transmission points of view. She has worked in national energy company assessing wind energy forecasts, as well as in restaurants, which ultimately led to the creation of GreenBytes. Today, she'll walk us through predicting food consumption using machine learning in a 10 billion population world. Before I hand it over to Renata, I'd like to ask you to submit any questions in the Q&A section below, and Renata will address them at the end of the presentation. So Renata, I'm handing it over to you now.
Thank you very much, Chuck. So hello, as Chuck mentioned, my name is Renata Bade, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of GreenBytes. And today I will be talking about the importance of predicting future food consumption in a world made up of billions of people. And again, as Chuck mentioned, if you guys have any questions, feel free to put them into the Q&A and I'll answer them as we go. And again, at the end, if I've missed any. So, the Food and Agricultural Organization estimates that around 1.3 billion metric tons of food is wasted every year globally. 1.3 billion tons. Throwing food away has a huge impact on the planet, which we'll get to in a moment, but it also has a huge economic impact. Throwing this much food away is the equivalent of throwing away 2.6 trillion US dollars. So when we talk in billions and trillions, it can be hard to put things into perspective. So let me help paint a picture for you. The Washington Post refers to waste as a vastly overlooked driver of climate change. Production, harvest, transport, packaging of wasted food all needlessly emit greenhouse gases into our air when food is needlessly thrown away. So if food waste were a country, it contributes 8% of the total greenhouse gases, and it means that it would have been the third largest contributor to greenhouse gases after China and the US. This is a huge impact, 8% of the total world greenhouse gases. So that's what those trillions of dollars are contributing to. So let's dive a little deeper into the problem caused by food waste. The environmental implications go beyond contributing an enormous amount of carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere. Food waste also depletes water resources, takes up unnecessary amounts of land, and impacts biodiversity. Water waste refers to water consumed or water withdrawn from a water source. Agriculture plays a major role in the global water footprint. The water footprint of agricultural products of food waste is actually larger than any nation in the world. So what that means is that the water it takes to produce the food that we waste is more than the agriculture in any country. That is a huge, huge number. In terms of land usage, the production of food waste makes up 28% of the world's agricultural land area. So not only is it wasting money and time and resources, it's also taking up land. And lastly, food waste has an undeniable economic impact, and it costs us trillions of dollars every year. But food waste has a deeper social implication than just money and land. It also leads to hunger. The food thrown away is enough to feed all of the hungry 4 times over. And incorrectly allocating food supplies leads to food being wasted in some parts of the world and people starving in other parts. So this is why this is a huge problem that we need to address. Now that we understand some of the reasons that food waste is such a complex problem, let us dig into where food waste is occurring. So if we look at a typical food supply chain, we'll have production, as you can see on the screen. We'll see production, processing, distribution, and consumption. So food waste distribution across the supply chain varies from market to market. So, for example, in sub-Saharan Africa, where there are not enough technological resources to keep up with the supply, most of the food is wasted at the beginning during production, storage, and processing because of that lack of technology. It actually comes up to 83% that is lost in sub-Saharan Africa in the production and storage phase. And only 5% is wasted by the consumers. But if we flip this okay, so I believe I was wrapping up my spiel about why food waste is bad, and I'll pick up from there. So just to recap, we all know food waste is bad. So I think it's important to understand where it's coming from, and also how we should go about solving it. So here we have different potential solutions that can go into reducing food waste. Some alternatives are recovering it, potentially in the form of compost, recycling it, reusing it, and using scraps creatively. But the most effective form of reducing food waste, according to this nice Greek man, is to prevent it before it happens. So that is where GreenBytes comes in. GreenBytes is a forecast service provider for food retailers that uses machine learning algorithms to predict future food consumption. By predicting future sales, the tool can optimize inventory and operational costs. We focus on restaurants and basically tell them how much food they need to be ordering, and we help them place those orders to their distributors. We break down menu items to determine how much of each ingredient goes into each menu item, and we track how much food is in our client's inventory, and we predict future sales based on past sales using machine learning. Restaurants already store vast amounts of data in their point of sales. So we simply access sales data that they already have to train our algorithms, predict future sales, and calculate how much of each ingredient the restaurant will need in the upcoming days. We make sure that our customers only buy what they need, both reducing operational costs, increasing profits, and reducing food waste. By providing dynamic data, analytics, and breaking it down in terms that are immediately relevant for key food retailer players, we can bring the power of computing to traditionally conservative and old school businesses. So let's get down into the nitty-gritty of how GreenBytes works. So one of the first types of modeling that we tried was ARIMA, or autoregressive integrating moving average model. This type of model is to fit time series data to either understand or predict future points in the time series. We use a time series that took in when the menu items were purchased and how much of each menu item was purchased. And we had a data set that was about 2 years long. The model was made by using the stats model in ARIMA in Python. Our parameters were set to P equals 5, D equals 1, and Q equals 0, where P is the order of the autoregressive part, D is the degree of the first differencing involved, and Q is the order of the correlation. We ultimately did not end up using the ARIMA model because we had higher success with recurrent neural networks. One of the potential downfalls of the ARIMA model that we used is that the predictions for future sales of each menu item were not correlated to the other menu items, meaning that the model may have been missing a level of complexity that made the model function as a simulation in a vacuum instead of a dynamic restaurant where the quantity of orders of one menu item definitely affects how another menu item is ordered. So let's talk a little bit more about the recurrent neural network that we did use. So just a little background, neural networks are flexible models that are used for predictive modeling problems, which is great for us. There are many different types of neural networks like multi-layer perceptron, convolutional neural networks, and recurrent neural networks. We use the last one, the recurrent neural network, because they're designed to work with sequence prediction problems, and our series prediction problem came in many forms. So a sequence of multiple steps as input was mapped to a sequence of multiple steps as output. Research of recurrent neural networks for time series data still remains really active, as recurrent neural networks do not always fit time series forecasting problems, but they have been used to predict future sales in other retail forms, not necessarily in food retailers yet. So we're excited to help contribute to that area of research. Some of the reasons that the recurrent neural network may have worked for us include that recurrent neural networks can take in data series with no predetermined size, unlike regular neural networks, which in our case is really good because our data set size changes very often. In a recurring neural network, a single input item from the series is related to the others and likely have an influence on its neighbors, which, as we previously spoke about, was one of the downfalls in our ARIMA model. And recurrent neural networks remember the past, and its decisions are influenced by what is learned from the past. So it kind of can take in seasonal changes and a whole bunch of different good changes from the past. For the models that GreenBytes used, we use a sigmoid activation function with a linear dense activation for arbitrary values was used. And the model was trained in batches of 8 weeks of data at a time for all the data available. So we use a gated recurrent unit of GRU with 700 units. And to avoid distortion of later outputs, we had a warm up of step size 50 And also, very important, we didn't want to overfit our models to the data that we had. So we use the model validation loss for early stopping. This model that we designed was used to test 30% of the collected data using the predict function. And then the results came out on values between 0 and 1. And we use an inverse transformation to map that back onto the original scales. So what does that all mean? What can we bring from that? Our models are 86% accurate, meaning that they are 16 times more accurate than the current manual ordering process. And by predicting future food consumption, we can reduce a little over 800 kilos or 1,700 pounds of food waste per month per restaurant location. Reducing that much food waste can reduce 1,040 kilograms of CO2 equivalent. And that is kind of like reducing a flight, the carbon emissions from a flight from London to New York City. So it's quite a lot. And I also want to touch on something else, on the user interface. Now that we know how to predict the future sales, I'll go ahead and explain a little bit about our user interface and its importance. At GreenBytes, we have designed and redesigned the interface that our clients interact with to apply the data analytics we have conducted to reduce food waste. Ultimately, it's very important that the user interface is simple and intuitive to use. So big data, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things have all come very far in terms of what they can offer technologically. But in order for this powerful technology to be applied on a large scale in new markets, it's very important that we consider how users interact with the technologies that we create. In the case of GreenBytes, we work directly with restaurant owners and employees. The GreenBytes team has spent years working in the food service industry and understands that the priority of those that work in restaurants is keeping customers happy and providing quality meals. And this can leave very little time for verifying and placing orders according to a big Excel spreadsheet or whatever sort of analytics they've got going for them. Meaning that though the technology that powers our services can be complex, using it shouldn't be. Okay, I want to briefly talk about the market. GreenBytes is currently focused on small and medium-sized companies. Our company is based in Iceland, so that is where the bulk of our testing has taken place. We have also been working on setting up test cases in other Scandinavian markets, namely Denmark and Norway. And we look forward to testing in more locations across the globe to see how our models perform in different geographic markets. Just to recap a little bit about the status of the GreenBytes service and where we're at. At GreenBytes, we have tested algorithms using 2 machine learning theories, developed an interface to ensure targets can easily use the service, and validated the market. I also want to switch gears and remember how we spoke about how waste occurs at every level of the food supply chain? I want to take a moment to talk about some of the solutions that use data analytics that can help reduce food waste across the supply chain. So now that we've talked a little bit about GreenBytes and how we can help reduce food waste at the food retailer side, namely restaurants, I want to take it a bit further and highlight some of the great technology that is being put together. Oh, I see some questions. How data science would help. Okay.
Yeah, we have 3 questions. Do you want me to read out for you?
Sure.
So the first question was from Andy. What software do you use for machine learning projects?
Great question. We are using Python.
Awesome.
Keep it simple and open source.
Then we have a question from Gayatri. How data science would help to reduce food waste?
Oh, well, that's a great question because we've just talked about how GreenBytes helps So we predict future sales to tell people the optimal amount of food to use. And I'm going to get into a whole bunch of other solutions that also use machine learning to reduce food waste. So I can go on with that, and then I can answer Kevin's question.
Awesome.
Cool. Okay. So to talk about some of these other really cool solutions, I want to talk about precision farming. So remember how we talked about how in sub-Saharan Africa, over 80% of food is lost at the farming, production, and processing stage? Well, this is one type of technology that is helping other markets be so successful in reducing this loss. So we starting way at the beginning of the food supply chain. Precision farming is the use of technology to optimize crop yields. Precision farming is a huge market. I think it's worth $43 billion. It is computer-based applications that combine Internet of Things and telecommunications and allows farmers to use sensors to increase crop yields more precisely. So I want to highlight this specific company called Future Gaia. They're a French company that uses machine learning to optimize their farming, and kind of when you're able to predict how much food you're going to produce, you can link it up to the demands that you are going to expect. And that way you are also optimizing that level of the supply chain. So the way that they do this is that they use Internet of Things to manage moisture, temperature, UV, sound exposure, pH balance, and nutrient balance, so that they can very precisely decide how much food is going to be produced. And if this is linked up to future long-scale predictions of how much food is going to be wanted, you can bring that together and reduce food waste at all different stages. So I'm going to go on and talk to you about a couple other solutions. Another really, really up-and-coming machine learning-based solution is dynamic pricing. So oftentimes you'll see that restaurants or grocery stores will reduce the prices of their food when it's about to go bad. But this can be automated and done to kind of like optimize how people react using machine learning. So dynamic pricing in grocery stores and other food retailers can save the food that's about to go bad. And they can create an economic incentive for everyone involved. They allow the grocery stores to sell food that probably wasn't going to get sold, and allows people to get food for a cheaper price. So one company that serves as a great example of dynamic pricing is Wasteless. They use artificial intelligence to automatically mark down perishable food that is close to its expiration date. Okay, and then another really interesting way to reduce food waste is quantifying the waste and kind of gaining an understanding of what we're throwing away and seeing how we can mitigate this. So Winnow, a company, I think they're based in Saudi, I believe so, has come up with a way to quantify food waste using image recognition and artificial intelligence. It's a very cool technology used for hospitality companies, where they take pictures of food and they can identify the food using artificial intelligence and that image recognition, and quantify how much is being used by weight. So I think it's really important to acknowledge all of the different solutions out there, because you notice how all of these solutions take on food waste with different approaches and at different points of the food supply chain. I only spoke about a few examples today, but just mentioning GreenBytes, Future Gaia, Wasteless, and Winnow, we covered production, grocery stores, hospitality, and restaurants. Food waste is an enormous problem affecting all of us through its contribution to climate change and high economic cost. But there are solutions working to combat food waste in many forms. And the unifying factor of all the most successful approaches is the innovative use of big data and machine learning. Data analytics and machine learning are not just future solutions. There are solutions being implemented now. Together, we can put technology to use and combat climate change in an impactful and tangible way. So I will now take some questions because I saw that there was a couple more.
Yes, there are quite a few. You want me to read the questions?
Sure, let's keep it interactive.
So Kevin, Kevin is asking, are you using any exogenous variables or market indicators in your model? If so, what are they?
So in the ARIMA model, we used weather data, but we haven't integrated that yet into the recurrent neural network model. But other than that, yeah, we're just using future sales or past sales to predict future sales.
Okay, do you want me to go on?
Yes, please.
Do you think we can perform a priori algorithm to see what food products are purchased frequently and plan resources accordingly? That's a question from Akshara.
So I'm not very familiar about this particular algorithm, but I think it's worth testing a whole bunch of different types of algorithms, which is something we've been trying to do because they all have their merits, and some of them have kind of in academia kind of been written off for like, oh, these are good for predicting weather, these are good for predicting retail things and that kind of stuff. So I think it's worth giving it a shot. If you have a data set, I don't think there's any harm in trying.
Makes sense. Okay, next question. So this is more like a case and question.
Mm-hmm.
Recently, the owner was concerned with a need to purchase additional stick fries from a local restaurant supply store. He asked me, how many fries did we sell last week? When I ran the report from our POS, the result was 0. According to my reports, we had no sales of fries aside an appetizer or anything. More of the fries we sell are as part of the main menu order, and we are not recorded in the POS separately. We do not currently utilize the receipt function of the POS because it is too time consuming and difficult to populate and maintain. How can your system GreenBytes help with this type of owner concerns?
That is a great question, Eric. We've definitely run into some of these problems because we typically integrate into point of sale systems, and we have definitely come across some like analysis that does not coincide with what is the whole picture. The way that we are kind of trying to make it more user-friendly to have a recipe addition is that we have the way that you put it in will hopefully in the future integrate with Excels. That's not currently happening, but right now we have like the way that our user interface is designed is so that it can kind of like very simply add things and take them away, and you can add sub recipes and kind of bring that together. But you're right, a lot of the times the point of sales don't capture the whole picture, which is why we're trying to take this whole holistic approach that kind of accounts for some of the blind spots. Because I mean, the point of sales do a really great job in doing what they need to do, and we're just hoping to help the point of sales take it a step further so that they can fully take into consideration this whole analysis. I hope that answered your question, Eric. And if not, you're welcome to email me for more information.
Awesome, thank you, Renata. So we have a question from Juan. How the forecast of consumption was affected by COVID-19. Oh, let me I missed that. and how it changes the result of the model, how you integrate these type of variables of the model.
That is a very good question. I can't fully answer it because a lot of the restaurants were closed. So there was kind of just like no ongoing data. But I think it would be very interesting to kind of find a restaurant that was continuously open and see the trends that come out. Because I also think it would be very interesting to see how the forecast consumption was affected by COVID. But unfortunately, our test cases did not reflect that.
Yeah, we struggled with the COVID, all of us.
See, I think that's a unifying factor throughout the world. Almost everyone was affected in some way. But what we're hoping to do is that we have significantly reduced the cost of our services and are even offering them for free if there's certain conditions involved, if you're willing to give more feedback and some other things to help restaurants get back on their feet as they try to exist in a later stage of the COVID world.
Right.
Renata, just to follow up on that, is your machine learning algorithm, is your product limited to restaurants, or is there opportunity to apply the same sort of analysis on delivery services, grocery stores, that sort of things, those areas that are really growing with the COVID crisis?
That is a great question. We currently focus on restaurants, but we have just submitted a research grant to look into doing the same thing for grocery stores and canteens. And we're working on putting together some partnerships with some local grocery stores so that we can test out our algorithms and see the dynamics that change, if there's different factors that make sense. So grocery stores would definitely be a logical next step because the point of sales system that we would take data from is kind of similar. But we're excited to kind of test it out in different canteen situations like cafeterias at government organizations and at schools and at elderly homes, because I know that here in Iceland, they have a way of quantifying the waste and recording what has been consumed. So I think with some research and understanding of how that process works, we can definitely figure out how to clean the data to also apply the solution in different food retailers. So absolutely.
Thank you.
Awesome. Let's continue. So George has a question. What outcomes have you noticed with regards to reducing cost and or time from a managerial perspective?
That is a really good question, George. So right now, most of our tests have been theoretical, so we haven't implemented the services in like restaurants from day to day, but we've conducted many interviews with lots of restaurant managers and chefs and owners. So we're hoping that to save time, I know that was part of the question, so I'll start there, by actually placing orders for our clients, so we can automatically send out orders to their different distributors after we have populated a sheet saying, oh, you should order this many kilos of chicken, this many kilos of tomato. If that is approved, they can just kind of confirm it and send out that information to all their distributors. And then in terms of saving money, so we can calculate that. There's a feature to put in the cost of all of your ingredients, or we hopefully in the future can automate that, but right now we're very new. So it is still a manual process of inputting that cost. And we can estimate how much food waste we've reduced by comparing the food waste before GreenBytes and after GreenBytes, and we can calculate how much money has been saved that way.
Awesome, that was insightful. Thank you, Renata. So Anita has her next question. For precision farming, what is the prerequisite at the farm? How do you see maturity in the space in different regions?
That is a great question. So precision farming is actually a very well-established market. So it's been started since like the 1900s. Precision farming now means artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, but more simple solutions can be started off depending on the markets that you're in. It can be as simple as like hooking up like a sensor to an external small Arduino or something that can tell you, oh, like the nutrients aren't good, or oh, like the water content is way too low. And there aren't too many requisites. Like it can vary from like a very old school farm to something as technological as like those Dutch greenhouses that have everything automatically changing the humidity and the nutrient contents. So it's a whole scale. And if you are interested in precision farming, I'd be happy to tell you more about it and link you with some interesting data that can maybe make sense for the different regions that you're in. Like personally, I am from Mexico, and I have some family members who grow different things. And I know that in different settings, different precision farming applications make sense. Like you don't have to throw all the technology on it. You can grow up to it, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. Okay, so
thank you, Fiona.
So the next question is from Michaela. In regards to food waste, is there any difference between restaurants or people that use organic and fresh products versus those that use mainly processed products?
I think that is a very interesting question. I can't speak off the top of my head using statistics, but I can give you an answer based on intuition and what I have understood. So the thing about organic and fresh products is that they're typically more perishable, meaning that they have a shorter shelf life. And sometimes they do end up throwing away more than would be anticipated. The good thing is that typically in restaurants that see themselves as very organic and green, the fresh produce will sometimes end up in compost as opposed to just in the garbage, which is kind of a positive, but it's still, I believe, a lot of food waste. And same thing with the processed food. Processed food kind of conversely has this longer shelf life, which allows it to be more flexible in how you use it. So I've noticed that in a lot of the food retailers that we approach that are, say, mainly using frozen food to put together their food, they are less interested in the solution that we have.
All right. So Andy is thanking you for the previous question and asking if you're going to consider using IBM SPSS modeler.
Thank you very much, Andy. We actually did consider using the IBS SPSS modeler. We were not successful with that, so we just kind of went with what yielded the best results for us.
Awesome, thank you, Renata. So Jade is asking, are you or will you be using social trending to determine food demand, like keto diets, paleo, gluten-free, and etc.?
I mean, we weren't going to, but that is a great idea.
Yeah, definitely. With all these diets.
Yeah, I know that in January, it's very popular in Iceland to go vegan for a month. So in January, it might make more sense to have more vegan food or to see how that goes into it. But some of the other factors that we definitely want to consider are weather and events close by, like if there's a sporting event, maybe even influx of tourism or lots of interesting things. But I think Jade brings up a really good point.
Thank you, Renata. There is Andy. So did you consider IBM for your machine learning software?
Yes, yeah, that's what it was for.
Awesome. Let's go to the next one. at the times there might be more demand for a particular item, and what if your models suggested less demand and there will be no backup for the restaurants? How will you handle such a situation?
Great question. So I answer this with the mind that I have worked in restaurants for many years, the same way that you would handle it if a restaurant didn't have what people wanted anyway, which happens very often. You would say, unfortunately, we don't have this item in stock. Let me point you in the direction of another thing. So simple as that.
Hope that is answering the question. So we have Eric again. Our restaurant did stay open during the crisis. At first, we only with only takeout, but moving on to the limited in-house seating. I would be, oh, he is happy to connect. Sorry about that.
Let me move my little slide over here. Here is my email. Feel free to send me an email. I would be happy to play with your data.
Awesome, awesome. Then we have Aaron Chen. Wonder if your company might have done some assessment of food waste based on consumer-driven survey feedback, such as capturing theme via app in self-reported fashion. This data, anonymous feedback from consumer, of course, may hold insight of the GIS type and various other dimensional drivers to the waste, which may fit into your models.
I think that's a really interesting suggestion. It's not something that we've considered yet. Right now, we have just been looking at the food consumption, so the sales. But this makes me think of this other company, it was very cool, called Meal Canteen, and they predict, well, no, they help reduce food waste by placing surveys and basically having students place their order for what they want in advance. I know that's not exactly the same thing of what you're saying, but it makes me think of them and I wanted to mention them. But I think it would be very interesting to have some sort of survey. We're definitely in the early stages, so I appreciate all of this really good feedback that people are contributing. Thank you.
There are a lot of things to cover. So, Eric, are there any applications available to help small restaurants identify local food distributors so they can reduce waste due delivery distances?
I know here in Iceland, there's one that can connect you to the cheapest food, like to the cheapest, like who offers a certain ingredient the cheapest. I'm not sure if there is one for location at a small scale, because I know that there's this big EU project where they're trying to understand like the logistics of like oversee import and export of food. I have to do a little bit of research. I don't know of any off the top of my head.
Thank you, Renata. So we have Gayatri. Question is, this will be help to solve environmental issues, but would it not cause effect on farmers' income? And many factories have a gain margin based on the quantity of food they're producing. So if production is less, they may lose some profits. Will all these sections will support this?
I'm not sure what this sections means, but yes. So right now, as it stands, farmers, producers, restaurants, hospitals, grocery stores, they all throw away lots of food. So that means that at the farmer level and at the factory level, there is food waste. And I think at the beginning, if we have a very big impact, this could change the way or can affect the way farmers and factory producers have their income. But I think if we're optimizing at every level, we can change the way that these pricing structures are made because these pricing structures are driven by different goals. And if our goals is to have a livable planet that we can all be breathing nice air in, I think that optimizing at every stage, we can redesign how we have these pricing structures. And I know that it's a big task, but if it gets to the point that we can affect so much change that it's affecting their profit margins, I think then a conversation can be had about the way that they make money, because there are ways to design your pricing models so that you can make money and also be beneficial for the planet.
Thank you, Renata.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if we addressed this one or did we miss it?
I believe we have answered this one.
I believe so. Yep. Awesome. That was really insightful. Thank you so much for answering so many questions. I hope these questions also help you in the
Absolutely.
future. Yeah.
People have great ideas.
Awesome. Chuck, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I was interested in one of the things that we had heard with the COVID crisis, particularly when it comes to restaurants versus grocery stores, is that there were two separate supply chains, at least in the States.
Mm-hmm.
One for commercial food and one for personal food or household food. And there was a lot of waste because of that. Have you seen any projects or any interest in using data to understand how that could be prevented if there's any in the future?
I think that is very interesting, because I would read those articles and just be aghast, and mostly also kind of excited because I've found it very interesting. Like, I'm sure data can help fix this. I actually, after reading some articles about that in the US, tried to put together like a brainstorming team with the Icelandic ministry that is in charge of researching food waste to try to understand where these are coming from and why these are so disconnected. I haven't heard of any solutions, but people, I think, are smarter than we like to think. And I'm hopeful that there is maybe a solution out there that is in the works. I can do some research and try to get back to you. I haven't heard of any tangible results, but I know that there's many logistics companies, and I think it's just kind of a question of transparency of data and just kind of communicating between one supply chain and the other, and restructuring from there, because I'm sure that through communication and transparency, there is a way to use big data analytics to make sure that this doesn't happen again at the same extent.
Absolutely. That's the big benefit of big data, is being able to bring separate streams together and communicate with each other. So
find trends that the human mind would take a little bit too long to understand, and just bring together unexpected things.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Renata. So we have one more. Thanks for the heads up, Aaron. This is not a question, it's just a thought. For consideration in tackling food waste, how can you incorporate reward-driven means to this initiative, which could give both companies and consumers more incentive to take part in addressing this issue?
Great comment. We've been toying with the idea of having some sort of like reward system that's similar to like how different airline agencies, you can be like a different member or have like a different status, and like maybe that could be a status that you share with your customers, and that lets people know, oh, they're a green company, they're reducing their food waste, they're only purchasing what they need. And that is as far as we've gotten with the reward-based system, because there is a lot of literature out there on how consumers feel about green products, and the growth of products from 2015 to 2019, I think is the last time I checked this research, was that 50% of it was made up of companies that marketed themselves as sustainable. So there is a lot of demand for sustainable products. And I think that if you can give some sort of stamp of approval, that might help in that reward system.
Yep. Thank you, Renata. Eric, if there are different distributions for grocery stores and restaurants, how do we help the farmers decide which distribution chain to sell to?
That is a very good question. I'm not too sure on how to answer that off the top of my head. How do we help farmers? I think we could extend the way that we predict future consumption and have that at every level. Like, for example, GreenBytes is focusing on restaurants, but we could have some sort of prediction of future need at different distribution levels. And this can all like be open to the public, and farmers can see, oh, they're gonna need this much, they're gonna need this, distributor A is gonna need X amount, and distributor B is gonna need Y amount. And by seeing the different future demands, it could be interesting to have that be how we tell farmers who's gonna need what. And that could also maybe help them sell all of the product that they produce.
Thank you.
But this is just off the top of my head. Great question.
Yep. Then we have Andy. Has anyone proposed tax cuts as rewards?
I think that would be a very interesting solution. Here in Iceland, we participated in a competition held by the Ministry of Commerce to help reduce, what was it, 1 million tons of CO2. And we proposed kind of the opposite, kind of having a penalty for waste. So if you were throwing away non-recyclables, that you would be charged to take them away. So we kind of looked at the opposite approach. It might be interesting to kind of assume that everyone has this amount of waste that they need thrown away and have a tax incentive.
Awesome. Renata, thank you so much for answering all these questions, and the presentation was really insightful. Thank you for being a part of the ABD Society. Chuck, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to apologize everyone for the interruptions, and thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much. Feel free to contact me at my email or follow GreenBytes at our website or social media.
Yeah, we're gonna share this this presentation on ABD Society social media and YouTube, so you will have access to the presentation as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.